and because any shortfalls are picked up by the council general funds and ultimately, therefore, the council taxpayer. Officers undertook a full review of the fees and charges and presented the method that we use for fee calculation, along with the proposed fees, to the Executive Member for Growth and Regeneration. And we were requested to stagger the implementation of the increased fees over a 2-year period. This was to ensure that the implications of the fee increase was reduced to the trade by introducing the fee increase over a 2-year period. It's therefore proposed that in year 1, 50% of the proposed fee uplift is applied, and then moving to full cost recovery from year 2. Therefore, the fees advertised do not cover the full cost to the council. So the fees that were advertised are the proposed fees that we plan to implement this year that include 50% of the increase. It is hoped that by staggering this increase, the impact on the trade will be reduced. Officers propose to levy 100% of the proposed fee in respect of the more simple and therefore cheaper application types, such as changing an address on a licence or reissuing a driver badge. That's to ensure full cost recovery. So in terms of the key principles that were used in fee setting, when determining the method to be used for calculating fees to ensure cost recovery, officers relied upon a local government association guidance, legislation and case law. The application fees are therefore broken down into 2 parts, and this is in accordance with local government association guidance. So there's 2 parts to the fee, Part A and Part B. Part A covers the costs of reviewing the application and determining that application whether to grant or refuse. Part B covers the costs related to the ongoing maintenance of the licence and the associated enforcement costs. So when we were undertaking the review, officers identified how much officer time was spent dealing with matters relating to each licence type. Therefore, we calculated the total officer time associated with processing and enforcing each type of licence. They also calculated the time spent on more general licensing matters, which we also need to take into account, such as developing licensing policy, maintaining taxi rank, fee setting work, and other relevant activities which the team need to undertake. So after we identified the time associated with each application type and how long it took people to process the application, the officer hourly rate was applied, including pension and national insurance costs, and an additional 20% was added onto the fee as is standard practice for financial accounting, and that's to cover corporate services that the licensing team receive, as do any other council service, such as the corporate leadership team, the legal services, democratic services, HR, IT, etc. So Appendix 1 shows the full list of the proposed fees and charges. Further details on how the fees were constructed is provided in paragraph 4.12 of the report. And just to go through the first one of those as an example. So for example, the Hackney Carriage and private hire driver fee, the full cost recovery would result in a fee of £332. And that includes a cost of £168 to administer the application process and £160 to cover the compliance monitoring and enforcement. So that's the Part A and the Part B. And then also on top of that, we've got consumables, so in this case, a driver badge. So it is, however, proposed that a fee of £262 is levied this year rather than the full cost of £332. And that's the 50% associated uplift. So the proposed fees and charges were subject to consultation between the 13th of November and the 10th of December 2025. And the responses along with the officer commentary are shown in Appendix 2. 7 responses were received and they're shown in full in the appendix. But in summary, some of the objections refer to a belief that the proposed increases are too high. There's a perception that the increase in fees cannot be justified. Some errors are believed to be part of the fee calculation, However, it's worth bearing in mind that the fees include officer hourly rate and consumables. So although fees may look like the same fee overall, actually the breakdown is slightly different in terms of officer time and consumables. So by consumables, so for a vehicle licence, that would be the plates, any signage, that kind of thing. In the consultation responses, there were requests that differing fees are provided for part-time drivers. However, the cost to the council of administering the licence and enforcing the licence remain the same, whether a driver chooses to use the licence on a full-time basis or a part-time basis. So officers felt that that couldn't be accommodated. It was perceived that the fees would add an additional burden onto the trade at the same time that other changes are being introduced. And also it was raised that the increased fees may mean that some drivers decide to leave the trade. So members will obviously want to consider the consultation responses provided in the report. Paragraph 5.2 details some other issues that members will need to consider, including the fact that the fees and charges levied on the licensed trade have not been increased for at least 5 years. So as I say, the fees that are in place now were first levied by the legacy authorities back when they did their fee setting in 2020. And during this 5-year period, the cost to the council have increased year on year. So they haven't kept pace. The fees haven't kept pace with the cost to the council. The current fees and charges being levied do not cover the council's costs of providing the service currently. And therefore there are shortfalls in the council budgets which need to be covered moving forward to ensure that we are offering the service on a cost-neutral basis as suggested by guidance. Section 7 of the report provides more detail of the financial position, but as you can see from the report, there is a disparity, a deficit in the budget. And in 2024-2025 financial period, that was in the region of £62,000. Also, you'll note in the report a mapping exercise was undertaken in December 2025, and that shows in paragraph 5.2 some of the proposed fees when you compare to neighbouring authorities. That is for information only because our fees should be based on a cost recovery basis. So officers considered that the proposed fees better reflect the true cost to the council of administering and enforcing the Hackney Carriage and private hire regime, and the method used to calculate them better reflects guidance and case law. Officers will continue to review licensing budgets to ensure that they are correctly profiled in accordance with guidance, because guidance does require financial budgets to be separately profiled for Hackney Carriage and private hire so that each regime is self-financing. So that review will be ongoing. So moving on to the report recommendations then. So the report recommendations are shown in paragraph 3.1. And they are that the Licensing Appeals Committee, A, note the proposed new methodology and construction of taxi fees and charges and agree that officers, in collaboration with finance colleagues, make structural changes to taxi licensing accounting arrangements to ensure that they reflect legal precedent. B, to consider the outcome of the consultation, which ran from the 13th of November to the 10th of December 2025 about the proposed fees and charges. And C, to determine the fees and charges which will apply to taxi licensing from the 26th of January 2026 to the end of March 2027. So finally then, the next step. So should members approve the proposed fees, they will take effect from the 26th of January until the end of March 2027. And officers will monitor the impact of the new fee levels on the taxi licensing budgets and will consider the updated financial position ahead of fee setting in 2027-28 financial year to include an analysis of any realised or projected deficits or surpluses. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mrs Wilcox. Members, do you have any questions of clarity for the officer? Nobody?
Sorry, excuse me.
Councillor Humberstone.
Thank you. Just one question for me on the report. Thank you for explaining it. I think the majority of that makes sense, and I have read it previously. I note the comments you made about the fact that at the moment it's technically a net cost to the authority because of the processing. There's a lot of detailed information with very specific figures about the cost to process applications. For example, £168.72 for licensing staff to process the application. It's so specific. How is that precisely calculated? Is it an overall cost that's then split down, or do you have specific costs?
So when officers did this, they created a spreadsheet. So basically we did kind of like a time and motion study for each type of licence. And we looked at the process that we go through as part of processing that application and considering it and determining how long each step of that process took. We considered which officer undertook that work and their hourly rate. And we looked at manager involvement. So behind that, there is a breakdown of all the tasks undertaken, how long each of those tasks take, and how much the associated cost is. Also, as I said, there's two parts to it. So that's part A is the processing of the application. And then also there's an element of the general overarching strategic work, so policy formation, enforcement, and that is worked out on a total basis, and then that is divided down into how many licences, so that those overall costs are proportioned between all types of licences in an appropriate way. So it's a mixture of very specific details for that particular licence and then the more general overarching costs. That makes sense.
Can I just ask a follow-up to that, if that's okay? Thank you. So, if an increase in the licence cost changed or reduced the numbers, then that could increase that processing cost because it's a smaller number of licences.
So, yes, that's why the guidance recommends that every year we do an analysis of our budgets,
okay,
so that if there is an overall deficit, that can be recaptured over that next period, or if there is an overall surplus, that can be offset by potentially reducing the licence fees down in future years. So that's why it's an ongoing process that we continually look forwards and backwards over the fees. But you're correct, that second element is an overall cost.
Thank you, Councillor Humberstone. Anybody else? Councillor Duffy?
Yeah, can I ask, when during the consultation period and looking at the new figures, was the increase in fares, the levelling up process between the four regions, was that taken into account? Because the increase in fares affected some regions more than others, didn't it?
Do you mean the fares to the members of the public?
Yes.
Right, okay. This is a separate process. So we have two separate processes.
Yeah.
We do set the maximum fares that can be charged by Hackney carriages, and that is a separate process. This is the fees and charges payable to the council by licence holders for holding the licence. So the two regimes are separate. Yeah,
I'm aware of that, but they both have an effect on the business of the driver.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is if in the levelling up process of the fares that the public are charged, if that levelling up affected one of the four regions more severely than the other three, because they had to make an increase, then that's affecting that region's business more. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, so that will have an impact on the trade. So the way licensing fees so the fees that are presented here are on a cost recovery basis only. So the idea of this fee setting process is to allow the council to recover its costs. So I agree with what you say, that the wider impact on the trade is an issue for consideration. But in terms of, as officers following the Local Government Association guidance in terms of fee setting, the advice is that we should offer the licensing service on a cost-neutral basis. So that's looking at how much it costs the council to deliver that service and recouping those costs from the licensing holders rather than from the wider public through general funds and council tax payments.
And can I follow up on that? And that would explain why, in the past, I presume, that part-time drivers would pay the same as a full-time, because the processing is the same.
Exactly, yeah. So we look at it, the process that's undertaken and how much does that cost the council, and if we issue a licence, whether the driver uses it all the time or part-time, for the council to administer that licence, it's the same cost to the council.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Anybody else got any questions before we move on? Nobody? I've received 3 requests, that's a correction, but I've received 2 requests to address the meeting, which I have permitted. We have Hugh Crosby and Neil Riley. Mr. Crosby, would you like to come forward, please? No.
Good evening. My name is Hugh Crosby. I've been a taxi proprietor since 1996.
Mr. Crosby, you have 3 minutes from when you start, okay? You can start now.
I've been a taxi proprietor since 1996, and I've got no confidence in this council licensing at all, because it's absolutely ridiculous. This badge I've got this year, last year cost me £130. It's now going to be £267. I think it's ridiculous, and the way they operate, they're hopeless, because my vehicle, I have to have 3 MOTs. There's taxis on the system now, same age as my vehicle, some older. I've only got to have 2 MOTs. Now, how can that be equal? How can I be treated equally for that? That's one instance. It's ridiculous. You know, where they get the rules and regulations and where they get the figures from, I've no idea, but they're not living in this planet. And what about the knowledge test? How many people have passed a new knowledge test? Can you answer that? You know, personally, I mean, I'm coming probably to the end of my licensing. My badge runs out in 28. That'll be it. But for the younger people, there's so many hoops you've got to jump through now to obtain a badge. And apart from part-time drivers, you'll never get part-time drivers are going to go through all that. And they're not guaranteed to get a job if they haven't got a vehicle. And you have to be buying a taxi now to viably do the job, because it's not going to work any other way. And it's not going forward, it's going backwards, the industry. You're going to have hardly any taxi drivers, because nobody is going to do it. I'd like to know how many badges were allocated, Hackney badges, last year. I bet I can count on my fingers. It's just going totally downhill. You know, and what I've heard from the employed people who bring new taxis on, they haven't got a clue where they get the qualifications from. I don't know, because I've heard stories about people bringing taxis on and what they've said to them. They don't know what they're doing. It's ridiculous. I could do a better job myself. I don't know anything about taxis or the trade. But it's getting very hard, and potholes, I mean, it's a joke. Your vehicle's got to be fit for purpose, but the roads are certainly not fit for purpose in this town. You know, totally, absolute shambles, the whole lot as far as I'm concerned. That's basically all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby. Would you like to sit down and allow the members to ask you some questions? Yeah. If you just continue there. Members, do you have any questions for the Speaker? Councillor Brooke.
Yeah, through the chair. Why do you have to have 3 tests on your vehicle, but yet vehicles are the same age only have to have 2? What's the reasoning for that? Do you know?
Could you press on your... Thank you,
Thank you.
Councillor Brooke. Mrs Wilcox, do you think you could maybe answer a few of these, or one of the panel answer a few of these questions that you'd asked?
I think they're for outside of this.
Sorry?
I think they would need to be looked at outside of the meeting because
Oh,
it's
okay, right,
specific to...
Yeah, thank you. We also have Mr Riley. Would you like to come up and give your statement? Just to let you know, you've got 3 minutes from when you start talking. Thank you.
Hello, I'm here tonight to object to the changes proposed by the licensing team. This is the latest of numerous changes introduced by this team since North Northamptonshire Council was formed. All were brought in with huge fanfare, declaring that this was the best for the trade and the residents of North Northamptonshire, despite strong resistance from the trade and which warned at every point about the impact it would have. I appreciate that cost goes up in every area, and on the whole I'm not objecting to that aspect. My objection is to the change that the licence department is to be funded by the trade it's supposed to represent. As this department has failed us at every point over the last few years, with falling numbers of drivers and owners handing back the vehicles, this resulted in massive year-on-year increases to the cost of the badge. Driver numbers will plummet further, thus leaving those left to pick up the bill. Those of you who live in Corby and use social media will be very aware of the constant complaints of mass shortage of available taxis over the last 3 years. This was all warned by the trade, but we weren't listened to. The last operational policy issued by Corby Borough Council was in 2013 and it was used until 2023. Since then we've had 2 policies and a third is already in the pipeline. 3 policies in 3 years. Why so many, you may ask? Because the licensing team are having to go back and rectify the mistakes they've made in the previous ones. Only yesterday the first knowledge test for the area was taken by 20 drivers. Assurances were given at various meetings that it wouldn't be impossible as suggested by the trade and would include only what the officers believe we should know. I know one of the drivers who took the test and has been driving in Corby for over 25 years. He failed it, as did the whole 20 experienced drivers from all over the county. Until we have faith in this department doing their job correctly, we shouldn't be footing the bill for their failure. Councillors, you weren't responsible for these failures. No one is blaming you, but you will be judged on your decisions from this moment as will the authority. What we want is the following: a comprehensive and independent audit of the licensing department. We urgently request a complete external and independent financial and procedural audit of the NNC licensing department. This audit must specifically focus on the purpose ring-fence monies collected from the licensing fees. We demand absolute clarity how the substantial fees paid by the trade will be allocated. These funds are intended solely to cover the cost of licensing, administration, enforcement and direct trade support. We have serious concerns that these funds will not be used effectively by this current department to benefit the licensed trade or improve the quality of the service provided to the public. The audit must also review the internal policies, decision-making processes and communication methods of the department to ensure that they are fair, compliant with national guidance and transparent to the licence holders, which currently isn't happening. And 2, immediate freeze on all fare increases.
You've got 20 seconds, Mr.
Given the
Riley.
pressing need for financial scrutiny and operational reform, we demand that all proposed future fare increases for taxi licensing be immediately frozen until such time as an independent audit is requested. We should not be asked to pay more into a system whose current management of their department is under question by the trade. We ask that you reject this proposal and actually listen to the trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Could you just stay there? Do we have any members got any questions for Mr. Riley? Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, thank you. Could I press you on what you said about the knowledge test
Yep.
that occurred yesterday? What percentage of the drivers failed?
100%. 20 drivers took it, experienced drivers took it, 20 drivers failed. I believe they had a meeting with the company that dealt with the testing today, 12:30. Maybe these informative officers can tell you about that. Anyone else?
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Is there any more questions? That's all. You may go back to your seat, Mr. Riley.
Thank you.
For the purpose of the debate in accordance with the Council's Constitution, Meeting Procedure Rules 19.2 and 19.21, I will move the officer recommendation as follows. A. To note the proposed new methodology and construction of taxi fees and charges and agree that officers, in collaboration with finance colleagues, make structural changes to taxi licence accounting arrangements to ensure they reflect legal precedent. B. To consider the outcomes of the consultation, which ran from 13th of November to the 10th of December 2025, about the proposed fees and the charges. C. To determine the fees and charges which will apply to the taxi licensing from 26th of January 2026 to the end of March 2027. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Beales. Thank you, Councillor. The members will now debate the application before you. Thank you. Councillor Humberstone.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's been some interesting comments, and I thank the public speakers for their comments as well. I think it's a difficult subject. I mean, it's a tough time for many people at the moment. There's been several recent tax rises that we've debated here, and I note the report that this is about consistency with other areas as well. However, I know there will be some reductions this year, but I'm concerned that going forward that this will lead to increases. It could lead to higher increases if the costs go up due to reduced services. And I think it's a difficult one to consider when we've got the balance between the cost to the council, the service that the council provides. Like many services, it's cost versus the service that they provide. So I think there's some interesting points for us all to consider here about the impact it will have not just on the people doing these roles in the private hire, but also the people that rely on the taxi services as well. Because ultimately, like anything, if the costs for the businesses increase, the costs for the services increase as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Humberstone. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I'm sure we all do, but I find it very difficult to look at this on its own, I guess, which is, I think, what the public have come up here and said, that, and you've said there's been other tax rises, which I've not been privy to. Yeah, it's just a really difficult one, because obviously we can't be running at a deficit, we can't be subsidising one area over other businesses. Yeah, but this, I mean, at this point we are voting just on this part of it, aren't we? Are we, the other points that the public have brought up, where are they debated? Yeah, sorry for not being very concise, but this is a really tricky one, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, sorry, nothing else to say, I suppose.
Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, I'd just be interested to know, it seems like one of the targets is for the licensing to break even, if you like, in our costs. Do we look to break even on when, you know, some of the rural bus routes and things like that? Does that cost us money? Surely not every service we provide we can break even on. Some services have to be provided at a loss because of the benefit it provides to the community. I think, I know we've got councillors from all over North Northamptonshire, but I think I'm brought up in Corby, and Corby's probably got a different background with taxis. And I think after the steelworks shut 40 years ago, I know that taxis are important for people who maybe aren't so financially well off. And the history of Corby was that in the 80s, I believe it was the fact that Corby had more taxis per head than London at one point. We had more taxis, black taxis per head than anywhere else in the UK. And historically, taxis are well utilised in Corby. And I would hate to see increases that we impose forcing people out of business. The part that bothers me here is that I can see the arguments that the two gentlemen from the public have brought forward. I can see their argument that taxi driving has been used as a supplement to another income. Part-time taxi drivers at weekends or evenings. And I think if we increase too much, that takes them out of the business. It is a difficult one. I see the argument from the council in wanting to balance things up, but I just think not every service we provide is going to balance the books, if you like.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Do we have any? Councillor Brooke?
Yeah, I agree. It's a very, very difficult situation. And it's hard. I mean, 5 years of no rises, to suddenly have a rise is going to be a shock, whichever. And as we all know, we haven't been looked on favourable by this government, and it has hit us hard. And these decisions are all hard, whichever way we look at it. But I can also see the taxi driver's point of view. It's, you know, it could end up taking a lot of them out of business. I don't know. I'm very on the fence on this. It's a very hard decision.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. For me, I can understand totally where the taxi drivers are coming from. Although it was many, many years ago when I was a young airman, I used to taxi part-time, basically to save up a deposit for my home. I'd do the Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning, just to collect this money to save up for a deposit. And when it came to increases in in fees, we all used to feel the same. Nobody liked an increase in fees. But unfortunately, in council today, in finance, the council has to meet its costs somehow, and it cannot be laid totally on the taxpayer to soak up this extra money. When it was brought up that other parts of council expenditure, we don't operate like that, but these are totally different subjects. Again, when you mentioned part-time drivers having to pay the same fee, well, even if you were to consider of giving them a reduced fee, you would never know when they were working part-time or full-time. So consequently, I think that the fees themselves, it's a little bit like ripping off a Band-Aid. I feel it'd be better to rip that Band-Aid off now and let it settle in. Thank you.
Could I just...
Do you have any more?
Yeah, sorry.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Being from Kettering all my life, I've always been an enviable, and we have all as a town envied Corby for their taxi service. And it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it was a fabulous taxi service where you'd actually go and get a Corby taxi to come to Kettering to take you to Corby, rather than the other way around, because it cost about 3 times as much. But I don't know that we can sustain that. But the other thing is, has anybody worked out what this is like per day? What sort of cost we were doing? I did some dirty maths earlier, but to be honest, it was a bit probably too dirty to cite. But are we talking £1 a day? Are we talking, in reality, what does this fee work out to be?
Mrs. Wilcox, are you able to answer that?
I haven't worked it out per day, but what I can tell you is the operator fees cover a 5-year period, so they're renewed every 5 years. The driver fees every 2 years, and the vehicle 3 years, and the vehicle fees are annual. So I haven't worked it out per day, but they are different times that they actually last for.
Okay, so it's different. Yeah, wish I'd have put a bit more effort in before I come actually, because that can sort out how you think. The one thing I did, I think, was calculate the difference between Corby, the 140, and the 262 or whatever it was, and I think it worked out as 20p a day. That was if it was over 1 year, but obviously, no, 60p a day, but that was, divide that by 3, it's 20p a day. So it was just, would have been nice, interesting to do that maybe. But anyway, it wasn't, thank you. So.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Do we have any more for this debate? Councillor Brooke?
There's not even any point in taking it over kind of thirds or something, is it? Because it's a 5-year period, whoever's going to fall in that time's going to, even if you extended it from 2 years to 3, into thirds, as opposed to a rise of half and half, it's not going to make that much difference, is it? It's still going to fall in. Depends where you fall in. The start of your licence, it's 5 years or 3 years. It's not going to make a huge difference. Yeah. Okay. That's it, really.
Thank you, Councillor Brooke. Anybody else want to speak? Thank you. I think we've had a good discussion on this item. Recommendations, as previously detailed, have been moved and seconded, and I think we should now move to a vote. Members using the relevant colour card in front, please indicate clearly by raising your card how you wish to vote when I ask. Those in favour? Those against? And any abstentions? Thank you, Member. For the motion is declared carried with votes for 3, against 1, and 1 abstention. Thank you very much. Thank you, and thank you those who have attended this. Thank you, and thank you for those who have attended this evening. There is no further business to discuss this evening, so I will close the meeting at 19:42 and wish you a safe journey home. Thank you.